All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Books and Books in Coral Gables. Thank you all for coming down this afternoon. Quick message for our internet audiences at home. As you can see from these lights and these cameras, we're live streaming this event on the internet. And for those of you watching, if at any time during the event you'd like to purchase a copy of today's book, you could just call the number on your screen. We'll take care of that for you. We'll have the author sign it, and we'll have the book shipped anywhere you are in the United States free of charge. For those of you joining us today from overseas, the shipping charge might be a little bit more. This afternoon, Books and Books is very pleased to welcome Mr. Charles U. Phillips and his new book, Fighting More Than Fires, Race and Politics in Miami-Dade County. And here to introduce Mr. Phillips, we're very happy to welcome his daughter, Erin. She's a junior at FIU and was just 10 years old when her father stepped down from his position with the fire department. She is, of course, very proud of her father's accomplishments. Please give a very warm welcome to Ms. Erin Phillips.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. My name is Erin Phillips. I'm the daughter of Dr. Charles U. Phillips, our featured author, and I'd have a few words I'd like to share with you all. When I was a child, I could always be found with my nose in a book. Literature always has and will always be my retreat, as the world seems far more simple in black and white. In the books from my youth, I found that the good guys rode white horses, your friends were honest and true to a fault, and the bad guys lurked in the shadows wearing dark hats. Abruptly, my illusion was shattered. At 10 years old, when my father was being vilified in the media, it was at that tender age that I realized that the world was not simply black and white. And when the events detailed in Fighting More Than Fires occurred, even as an observer of the firestorm, I lost some of my childhood innocence. I could no longer hold the belief that life followed the rules of the books I once clung to. The bad guys had not appeared evil, and their dastardly deeds were not overt. And as the accusations against my father piled up, and the reporters permanently stationed on our front lawn grew, I realized that friends we once thought were true had joined the ranks of those with the pointed fingers and the accusatory stares. And I was devastated when I realized that good guys were few and far between, and there wasn't a white horse in sight. Thankfully, though the effects of the war waged on, our battle was won, enabling us to resume a sense of normalcy. And although a decade has passed since the events detailed in Fighting More Than Fires occurred, my father's struggle and the injustices he faced must not be forgotten. Because as motives became clear and friend became foe, read along and you'll see that he truly was fighting more than fires. I'm honored to present to you all the man who faced the firestorm brought against him and persevered to tell the tale. My father, my hero, Dr. Charles U. Phillips.
Thank you, Erin. I would like to thank everyone for coming out and showing support for my opening of my book, Fighting More Than Fires, Race and Politics in Miami-Dade County. And I also like to thank the staff for their support in holding this event. Fighting More Than Fires. This is my story of a young man raised in Miami Liberty City who came from humble beginnings, joined a mostly segregated Miami-Dade Fire Department, and rose to the ranks to become the first African-American fire chief in Miami-Dade County, only to be forced out 2 years later on false allegations. This is a tell-all book. A book of deception, betrayal, and perseverance. But I think it's much more. I think it's an American story. This was a hard and soul-searching project that took almost 10 years to complete. I relied on my studious notes and journals since my days in fire college. I'd like to dedicate this book to my late mother Hattie, to my late wife Z, my black butterfly, who gave me the strength and support to tell my story and was my voice when it was lost. The purpose of this book, Fighting More Than Fires, Race and Politics in Miami-Dade County, was to document the history of African-American firefighters in the fire service, and also to inspire readers to achieve their own unreachable goals, and to also learn the power of perseverance. After being pounded by the media for over 2 months, this is my opportunity to tell my side of the story. Contrary to what you may have read or heard, this is the true story. Some of the passages I'm going to read will give you an example of my experience in the fire service. I will start off in chapter 1. It's titled, Learning to Get Along with White People, the Early Years. While growing up in Miami African-American community, it was rare to see firefighters, firemen as they were once called, up close and personal. The fire station in the African-American community were always locked and the bay doors were closed or out of view. The fire station and firefighters were so invisible, most of the people in the community didn't even realize they had a fire station in their neighborhood. My introduction to firefighters in action was during a civil rights demonstration in the 60s. I remember sitting transfixed by the television image of thousands of marchers being brutalized both verbally and physically by men who were commissioned to save lives, police and firemen. I watched as firemen aimed their hose string capable of 200 psi, and that's the amount of hose pressure, at the exposed body of the protesters, young, old, men, and women, as they march in protest of injustice. I thought it was ironic that a group fighting for equality would be treated with such disrespect and blatant inequality. I felt anger, pain, confusion that these firemen who was hailed as heroes for their roles in saving lives would show so little regards for the lives of the people they attacked simply because their skin was black or brown. In a child innocent, I also felt anger at the marchers for not fighting back, for passively allowing the mob to abuse them. I felt ashamed of being African American. I did not understand that the marchers were exhibiting enormous strength and composure. I had not yet learned the power of perseverance. Although Miami was not really considered a major center of civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, it did not escape the change that occurred. Miami was a major city in the southern state of Florida, and it always had a substantial African-American and Afro-Caribbean population. This lack of understanding was a great source of contention while growing up. It bothered me to no end the way white people, even their children, addressed my parents so informally, calling them by their first name or worse, no name at all. In contrast, my parents always addressed them formally or respectfully as Mr., Mrs., or Ms. Inside my small African-American neighborhood and church, my parents were well-regarded, upstanding citizens, while outside in the white world, they were reduced to children. I guess I was an angry kid growing up. My young heart applauded the rise in visibility of the Black Muslim and the Black Panther Party. These men were the epitome of strength and pride. They demanded, not asked, for their God-given right to freedom and equality. I remember thinking and actually hoping that they would be the savior of blacks in America. I was in middle school when my mother sat me down for a heart-to-heart to discuss the ways of the world. And actually, she slapped me side the big head and said, "Sit down." Dr. Martin Luther King had just been killed. Malcolm X had been killed 3 years earlier, and my emotions were a kaleidoscope of fear, pain, anger, shame, confusion, and hate. My mother told me of her hopes and dreams for me and the importance of success in my life. She explained that even though the struggle seemed hopeless, many gains have been made, and that both civil rights leader King and Malcolm X had planted the seed for change. She explained that it was now up to me to take that seed to fruition in my own life. I began to understand and garner a profound respect for the courage it took for these common people to take to the streets and peacefully protest centuries of unjust and oppression treatment based solely on skin color. The reason I chose this title, Getting Along with White People, was my interview with the fire department, the personnel department. One of the first questions they asked me was, did I know how to get along with white people? So that became the title for that chapter. The next chapter is in chapter 2 on page 17. I will read from. At this point, I talk about my first week in fire college. In the early 1970s, the federal courts forced Miami-Dade County to integrate its fire service. I was a member of Class 28, the first predominantly African-American class. And that class consists of 40 African-Americans, 5 Hispanics, and 5 white males. The Fire Academy taught the class lectures from the Red Book, a series of books produced by the International Fire Service Training Association, ISTA. ISTA books were considered the holy Bible of the fire service. They utilized in every fire service training program in the country. Typically, we were given a full 8-hour day lecture followed by 2 days of drilling and testing, both written and practical. It was mandatory to pass all written exam. Failure of any course will result in dismissal from the program. Recruits were given 2 chances to pass each of the practical exercises. Our first class in the Red Books were on ladders. Since I was in the middle of my second year of college, the lecture portion were a breeze, and the written portion were a breeze. The practical portion, however, proved to be another story. The fire instructor for our ladder course was Lieutenant Pete Hendricks. He told us that typically there were 2 ladders that tested a recruit manhood, the 28-foot wooden ladder and the Pompier ladder. The Pompier ladder is a goose-shaped ladder used in high-rise operation. He joked that most of us African-American recruits should not have a problem doing the ladder drill because our resemblance to monkeys. I was confused and pissed off, not only at the instructors, but at the older recruits who failed to respond. It was going to be a long 6 weeks. I was 20 years old, and I had a fear of those ladders too because I was 130 pounds soaking wet. During the class, the recruits were seated in alphabetical order. This arrangement helped to facilitate the appearance of camaraderie. But we separated like oil and water as soon as the lunch bell rang. During lunchtime, the African-American recruits gathered at the table under an oak tree. The 5 Hispanics gathered nearby. The white recruits went on their separate way, which was fine with us. It gave us a chance to relax. The break only lasted 45 minutes, so most of us brought in boxed lunch. We used this time to get to know one another and discuss what was happening in training. During these discussions, some of the older recruits were full of bravado and what they would have done. Being young and still naive, I was confused by the contrast in class attitude and the lunch attitude. During one of our early discussions, I asked and immediately regretted asking why we were just standing by and allowing the fire instructors to mistreat us. Why did we tolerate the racist statement and unjust standards? All heads turned to face me, and after a deafening silence, recruit Frank Hartley, about 15 years my senior, slowly stood up and pointed his finger at me. He said, "Listen here, young buck. I have been in the military and traveled all over this country, and I can tell you now that what goes on here is no different than what goes on in any place in America." Hartley told me that a lot of the older recruits had families and that they are depending on them, and you'll soon learn that sometimes in life you have to do things that you don't like in order to survive. This mindset was mirrored by most of the men, as indicated by the nodding of heads and solemn face in the group. The general consensus was that in a racist world, there are very few good jobs, opportunities for African American men. So if being non-resistant would lead to such an opportunity, then so be it. In Hartley's words, the firefighter job is a damn good job, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to survive, even if it includes sucking up to a group of white racists. After concluding the lecture on the ladder, we started on the practical. I had done well on most of the ladder drills. However, that changed when it came to the drill with the 28-foot wooden ladder. The instructor had warned that this particular drill would be a true test of manhood. This drill was considered ominous because of the weight and length of the ladder. Apparently, many careers have been deterred when ill-fated recruits were unable to cut the mustard. Although most of the recruits in my squad struggled raising this ladder, they were all able to complete the ladder drill. When my time came to raise the ladder, I was so stressed out from the fear of this ladder drill that I was going to faint. If the larger, physical, stronger men were struggling, what chance did I have? I tried psyching myself out, exercising positive thinking, telling myself that I was the man and that I can do anything. I took a deep breath, stuck out my chest, and grabbed the ladder. Building my momentum, I began hoisting the ladder to an upright position. Halfway through the lift, my arms started to buckle. I saw the ladder moving back towards my direction, and I was powerless to do anything. Thankfully, one of the fire instructors immediately grabbed the ladder before it fell on me. When I was able to breathe again, I told the instructor I was fine and wanted to complete the drill. Still holding the ladder, I attempted to continue, only to have the ladder retreat towards my head again. At this point, my arms were shot. This time, the instructor grabbed the ladder and assisted me in lowering it to the ground. Failed. My squad leader, Lieutenant Ranking, pulled me aside and advised me that I would receive my second attempt at the drill after lunch. I had been hoping for at least a day reprieve, a little time to rest my arm, lift some weights, do something. A second failure would result in my dismissal from the program. Several of my classmates, along with my cousin Larry, came over to give me a pep talk. I was embarrassed and ashamed because I had been the only one to fail the drill. To make matters worse, the entire recruit training class had witnessed my failure. During lunch, I couldn't eat or drink anything because I couldn't stop thinking about my upcoming second attempt and what it would mean if I failed it too. I sat off by myself wondering how I was going to lift that ladder. I was feeling hopeless, And then I heard my mother's voice speaking to me. She told me there was nothing I could not do. When I was a young boy, my mother would tell me the story of when she was pregnant with me. As the story goes, during her 8th month, an angel came to her and told her that this child she was carrying was special. The angel said that he would someday make a difference in this world. For as long as I could remember, my mother had always pushed me more than my other brothers and sisters. I would do anything to merit my mother's praise. With this new feeling of confidence, I knew I could not fail. When the class resumed, I readily walked up to the ladder, lifted to the position, and completed the drill with no problem. Passed. The next section I'm going to read from is called The Process of Elimination, Learning to Survive. After a successful first week with no idea of what lay ahead, I entered the second week actually looking forward to the rest of training. I contemplated the upcoming challenges and the opportunity to learn more about firefighting with unbridled anticipation. Then reality struck. After the morning classroom, Lieutenant Barnes called off a list of recruits to report to Fire Administration Office. All the names were African-American recruits. My name was on the list. Each recruit was called into the office of the Training Academy, OIC, that's officer in charge, individually. When I entered the room, Captain Gene Perry was sitting behind the desk. Standing beside him were Lieutenant Ranking, Lieutenant Barnes, and Lieutenant Corley. Captain Perry looked up at me without saying a word. He handed me a memo from the desk and told me to sign it. As I began to read the memo, Lieutenant Barnes informed me that it was reported that I had been overheard by some of the fire instructors making racist remarks. Lieutenant Barnes stated that my own squad leader, Lieutenant Ranking, was one of the instructors who had overheard these comments. I was really taken aback. I looked at Lieutenant Ranking in disbelief. Of all the recruit instructors, I thought Lieutenant Ranking was different. He seemed to always treat everyone fairly, and I thought back to our conversation about fencing, the notion that we had actually bonded because our passion and interest in the sport seemed humorous. As I read the memo, I was speechless. It consisted of only one paragraph stating that I was resigning from the fire college to pursue other job opportunities. Captain Perry told me that if I signed a letter, I would be given a good reference. If I refused, I would be fired. I looked Captain Perry straight in the eyes and told him that I wasn't going to resign and that they would have to fire me in order to get me out. When I refused to sign that resignation letter, Captain Perry changed his strategy. His face feigned concern as he explained how difficult it would be for me and African-American recruits to survive in the fire station. He said that everyone was against working with us and that the situation could become hostile. He continued to explain that the fire instructors was only looking out for our best interests. Then, as if I needed his advice, he chuckled that surely there were a lot of other job opportunities out there for a smart boy like me. When I told him that I was not going to resign, he warned me that I was making a major mistake. He said that I did not have a snowball chance in hell of graduating from recruit training. This time, he looked at me with disgust and told me to return to the classroom. As I walked back to the classroom, I started wondering how far these instructors were willing to go to keep us from graduating. I did not know whether this was a ploy or a test of our commitment or a sinister tactics to purge the number of African-American recruits. My money should have been on a ladder. The same resignation letter was presented to all 40 African-American recruits. Not one of us signed. During our lunch break, we talked about our experiences that morning. One of the recruits, Jimmy Dennis, was a very imposing 6'5", 275-pound man. He told us that when he was asked to sign a resignation letter, he instead told him a story about his tour of duty in Vietnam. The story is that he had a collection of ears from enemy kills, and that he kept them as a reminder that he's one badass MF who did not take shit from anyone. I don't know if either story is true, but from that day on, Dennis had smooth sailing through the fire training program. In fact, all them fire instructors seem to now want to be his friend. Unfortunately, that transformation of attitude towards recruit Dennis did not translate to the rest of us. And after that, even the recruits were scared of Dennis. So. The next section I will read from is on page 89, The Rise of the Progressive Firefighters. Now, at this point, it's been about 3 or 4 years when I was in the fire service at that point. And we formed an organization. I was co-founder of it called Progressive Firefighters. I was co-founder of that organization. And we formulate, because of the harassment and discrimination within the fire department itself, we tried working with the union and management with no help. So this is, at this point, the Progressive Firefighters filed a lawsuit, equal opportunity lawsuits against Miami-Dade County. And the union later joined on the side of the department against the lawsuit. 1 month after the lawsuit was filed, the local union, 1403, asked the courts for permission to enter the lawsuit as a third party on the side of the county. 3 months later, I was contacted by Dominic Barbera. He was president of the local union, with Al Jones, the vice president, to discuss the lawsuit. Attorney Harold Comer, which was representing the Progressive Firefighters, accompanied me to the meeting at the union office. The union attorney was also present. Dominic began by asking me why we filed a lawsuit without first giving the department and the union an opportunity to address the issues. I reminded Dominic of the numerous times that we had discussed these same issues with both management and the union without either of them offering any support or assistance. I also reminded Dominic that he personally told me that the Progressive Firefighters should file a lawsuit because the majority of the firefighters were on the opposite side of the issues and complaints. Dominic restated his personal empathy with the PFA and suggested that we attended the next union meeting. He assured me that he would personally present our position to the management, the membership, in hopes of providing the correct information. Attorney Harold Comer told Dominic that he was concerned about our safety, and particularly my safety, in light of numerous death threats that I had been receiving. Dominic assured him that I would be safe and that I had nothing to worry about. When we filed a lawsuit, I was receiving a lot of death threats. My car was vandalized at the fire station, and they placed a noose around a card box at Station 6 down south with a rope around my neck in the station, in the back of the station. At the next Progressive Firefighter meeting, I reported the substance of the conversation with Dominic and encouraged all members who would be off duty to attend the upcoming meeting with me and the other executive boards as a show of support. About 25 members, Progressive Firefighters member, made the commitment. Willie Brinson, Bobby Brown, and I arrived at the Union Hall together at 7 p.m. I was amazed and a little intimidated by the crowd. Although the union meeting started at 7 p.m., the open bar in the Union Hall was normally open a half hour beforehand. It was considered a good night if 30 members attended the meeting. This night, over 300 angry, intoxicated white firefighters were waiting for us. Only 7 African-American firefighters showed up. Dominic started the meeting on time and motioned for me to sit in an open area that was located in the front row. While walking to our seat, the hostile crowd started yelling obscenities towards us. All I could hear was the chanting of "nigger, get out of here." It seemed like it took us 2 days to make our way to our seats in the front row. When we finally made it, Willie Brinson kept telling me that we should get out of here and that they were going to kill us. While Willie then noticed that the only exit in the meeting place were located in the back of the room. I could see Willie sweating bullets. With the sounds of the hostile crowds getting louder and more boisterous, Willie suddenly yelled out, "We're fucked." Bobby Brown told Willie not to worry because he had brought a gun and we can shoot our way out of here. Bobby showed us his gun, which he was carrying in his tote bag. As the crowd kept chanting obscenities, Dominic told the crowd that the president of the Progressive Firefighters and the person responsible for filing the lawsuit was in the meeting, Charles Phillips, pointing his finger towards me. At that moment, I knew that Dominic had set me up. I stood up and tried to explain to the crowd why we had to file the lawsuit. I was met with obscenities, being called nigger, among other names, and repeatedly been threatened with bodily harm. Dennis Johnson stood up and tried to give, he was a member of the Progressive Firefighter and also the co-founder, got up and tried to explain to the crowd, but the loud noise drowned him out. At that moment, Ron Elliott and Lee Stringer walked into the room. With the chanting and obscenity still going, Ron yelled out, "Which one of you called me a nigger?" After he threatened to kick everyone's ass, Ron Elliott was a big guy, former boxer, kick everyone's ass. Once he did that, Willie and I knew we were in a world of trouble. The entire room went silent. It was so quiet you can hear a pin drop. Surprisingly, not one of those firefighters that were yelling out all these racial obscenities took up Ron Elliott's challenge, even though he was severely outnumbered. At that moment, I felt that it was a good time as any to exit the building. And I like to show the audience, too, when we filed a lawsuit, the union put out in 1980, put out a newsletter. And in his newsletter, it said progressive or regressive. And you have the judge telling the union attorney, "I hope you're prepared for this," and show us walking in with Abraham Lincoln. This was in 1980 when we filed a lawsuit. The next section is the changing of the guard on page 152. Now, this was many years later. At this point, I'm the airport fire chief. I signed up for a program with FIU called the Executive Development Leadership Program, and County Manager Mondo Vidal became my mentor in this program. And the manager had told me that he recognized my hard work and preparation and dedication, and that he told me that I was an asset to the county, and that he told me that stay cool, and he was going to promote me to the deputy fire chief position. Now, at this point, I haven't heard anything regarding the deputy director position prior for about 2-3 months. So I was still staying quiet, waiting for the manager to make that announcement. I was scheduled to go for an airport fire conference, and airport conference. And that evening, the day before, Chief Lee Stringer, a coworker and a member of my class of Clip 28, contacted me and said that Chief Paulison, which was the fire chief at the time, had sent in a request to the county manager to place someone else in that position. And he wanted me to not go in that conference, to stay here and fight. About 1 week after the airport conference, I told Stringer that I was just going to leave it to faith, and we'll see where it goes at this point. About 1 week after the airport conference, the Defiant airplane crash occurred. This was a cargo plane that crashed while attempting to take off from Miami International Airport. All 5 members of the crew were killed on impact. As the airport fire chief, I was the incident commander of the crash site. It was a media circus. The crew members were killed on impact, but there were several small buildings and car fires caused by the highly flammable fuel flowing from the aircraft wreckage. The media was interfering with our ability to put out the fire. Since the mayor, and this is Mayor Pinellas, had not arrived, the county communication director told us not to grant interviews to the media. If most people remember, during that period of time, directors couldn't give out anything on major incident until Pinellas arrived on the scene. The mayor wanted to be the first to give the interview. Trying to avoid the media was a job in itself. When Fire Chief Paulison arrived at the scene with an assistant chief, I gave them an overview of what had occurred. I did the same thing when Mayor Pinellas arrived at the command post. The mayor requested that I stand alongside him and brief him if the media had any questions about the incident that he could not answer. After I attended the press conference with Mayor Pinellas, Chief Paulison walked up to me and announced that he was promoting me to deputy fire chief. Although I knew that I was being promoted over Chief Paulison's personal wishes, I thanked him and I told him that I was very appreciative of the promotion and opportunity, and that I promised that I would not let him down. I meant it. For the first time in my career, I really felt that I made it. I could not help but reflect on the trials and tribulations that it took for me to reach this new height in my career. To be deputy director of what most considered the premier fire department in the United States and possibly the world was a great honor and very overwhelming. The added feature of being the first African American to hold this title was just icing on the cake. But it didn't take long for me to be knocked off my high horse. If I ever had any thoughts that life would be different now that I was deputy director, I was only fooling myself. On my first day as deputy, I entered my new office and found a note on my desk. In large and bold print were the words, affirmative action. It obviously didn't matter that no one on staff, including the current fire chief or past fire chief, could come close to the credentials that I possessed upon taking this position. There was something else strange in my office, a strong, foul odor. When I looked around, I discovered human feces in the corner of my office. I don't know why I felt things would be different and the climate would automatically change just because I was now the deputy chief. I was dead wrong. I called maintenance and had them clean and deodorize my office. When I notified Chief Paulison, he simply brushed it off, saying somebody was just playing practical jokes. I knew that this was more than someone playing a practical joke. This was a racist and hateful act. Even though I was the deputy director of one of the largest fire departments in the country, I was still an unworthy African-American man. Later that day, when I got home, I discussed the events of the day with my wife. And in my frustration, I told her that I felt I was fighting more than fires. And that's when my wife told me that should be the name of your book. So I had this title since 1997, almost 7-8 years before I even started writing the book. The highest point of my career was being sworn in as the first African American fire chief in front of family, friends, fellow co-workers, community leaders, and supporters from all walks of Miami-Dade County. It was a very humbling experience. I could not help but reflect on the trials of the civil rights workers and marchers as they march in protest for injustice, and all the sacrifices and abuse that they went through in order for me to be here. And of my mother, my inspiration, my hero that molded me into the person that I am today. The lowest point of my career was being forced out 2 years later based on false allegations. After being cleared of all the allegations and then being told by the new county manager that the union didn't want me back because the morale was poor. I loved that job, but the most hurtful part was the damage to my reputation. How do you fight against people, institutions that buys ink by the barrel? I realized this was not just about forcing me out as fire chief. This was about destroying me as a man. They didn't succeed. One of the quotes when I became training fire chief that I placed in my office to remind myself to be grounded was a quote by Booker T. Washington. Success is to be measured not so much by the the position that one has reached in life, as by the obstacles which he has overcome while trying to succeed. Conclusion. It took more than 2 years emotionally to recover from the assault and attacks from Miami-Dade County and the media. For too long, I have held onto the bitter taste and hatred that was constantly eating away at my soul. I had isolated myself from a lot of my friends who just didn't know how to help me. I was absorbed in self-pity when I should have been grateful for all the things I had achieved in my life and thankful for the many fortunes that had came my way. I had stayed in the dark for too long, and it was time for me to come into the light. Growing up in my family, I was the rock, the strong one that everyone looked up to, leaned on, and came to for advice. I took pride in having that responsibility. I had trouble letting go. But slowly, with the support and encouragement of my family, I started to come out of my depression. It was a long, hard road. As I reflect on my past and future, I can now smile and put away my Miami-Dade Fire Department uniform that had been hung up in my office ever since I was placed on administrative leave. I am most proud of the fact that I did make a positive difference in the lives of my community, the fire department operations, and these dedicated firefighters. I did all this without sacrificing my ethics or moral belief. I achieved success not by stepping over someone else, but by doing it, in my opinion, the right way. When I now read and hear about the accomplishments of Miami-Dade Fire Department and their innovations, like being the first in the country with a motorcycle emergency response team, I smile. This was one of my contributions to the fire department and this community. I truly love being a firefighter and working in the public sector. Although during my 29 years of service with the Miami-Dade County, there have been many unhappy and challenging days, by far, my time in the fire service was gratifying and rewarding. Being a firefighter is, in my opinion, the best job in the world. I can't imagine doing anything else. I will miss it. While I was going through this torment for over 2 years, my mother kept telling me, until I started believing it myself, that God was not yet finished with me and still had plans for me, and that I just needed to be ready and open to receive them. My mother knew that I had started questioning my religious belief on why the Lord was allowing these things to happen to me. My mother gave me a copy of a poem called Footprints, Anonymous, and told me to read this poem over and over until I remember always that it was the Lord that was holding me up at my lowest point and kept me from falling down. As I came to completing this book, my daughter Erin told me that she was proud of me and that I should be proud of all the things that I had accomplished. She said being the first African-American fire chief for Miami-Dade County was history, and that is something they can never take away from you. Recently, I received a birthday card from my mother that was perfect for my ending. On your birthday, may you reflect on all the things you've been through, the long travel, the obstacles you overcome, and the victories you won. And may you feel good about those things because they're all a very important part of that very special person you are. That was by Hallmark. Thank you. Now, entertain any questions, if you want.
When you stepped down as fire chief, did you leave the department then, or did you stay on?
I left. I retired. I had 29 years of service, and when I first got the job, you know, I already told myself that I was going to be fired, but I thought it would be about 5 years because I was not going to be a caretaker. The position I took, sometimes they want you to be the caretaker as a symbol and not actually run a department. While I was there, I ran the department, and so I knew it wasn't going to be long. But I didn't think it would be forced out based upon those type of things, basically management style, time to get out. But what they did to me as far as trying to destroy my reputation, you know, on a career that I built up over 29 years. You know, I was a straightforward, and, you know, I mean, even the union would tell you I was straightforward. They may not agree with everything I said, but when they knew they were talking to me, they would talk, what I was saying was what I believed in and what I felt was best for the organization.
Who was county manager?
When the person that took me through that was Shriver, Manager Shriver, and basically he was forced out because of all the things he said that occurred to me didn't occur, and then the mayor had his opportunity to push him out at that point, and then Burgess became the county manager, the new county manager to come in, and his thing, he wanted to bring his own personnel and want to start off fresh because he felt the publicity brought bad morale to the organization itself. Now, actually, I could have fought to try to save my job because the county commission had passed, I think, about a year before that it would take, I think, 4/5 votes to remove me from office. But because the manager didn't want me, and it was a tough decision, and I know I couldn't operate, you know, with that much pressure. And it was funny because, not funny to me, but prior to when the manager placed me on administrative leave, you know, the day before I was in Jackson Hospital being treated for chest pains and irregular heartbeat the day before. So you know, yeah, Shriver. I wasn't a team player. And yeah, so, and some neck of the woods, team players mean, hey, this is what I want you to do. So, any other questions?
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was reminded of Lord Tennyson's words in his poem Ulysses, and he concludes it by saying, and this comes from memory at my stage of the game, but fellows was unreliable. He said, "We are not now that strength which in olden days moved earth and heaven. But that which we are. Weak by time and fate, but strong in the will to seek, to strive, to find, and not to yield."
I believe in that.
Mr. Phillips, Maybe you could share with us a little, how long did it take for you to get cleared of the charges, and did you ever get any restitution for the false accusation?
No, it took, actually, I think it took, when I was cleared, I think maybe about 2 or 3 weeks for actually when the state attorney, now this is what they did to me. And it was hard for me to try. Sometimes people like to say, you're throwing a race card, and I kept that out of there. What they did to me was different. The county policy, when someone is accused of accusation, we have an Office of Fair Employment to investigate the charges. You never hear of it until the conclusion, whether the person is cleared or found guilty or there's some basis for those things. Well, this time, the county manager said, well, he wanted to do something different with me. He wanted to have the Miami-Dade Police Department to do the investigation. And also, he brought in the state attorney's office to do the investigation. Now, the same charges was on someone accused another director within the county at the same time. You never heard of that because the Office of Fair Employment did the investigation, not the Miami-Dade Police Department, and not the state attorney's office. And even with those cleared, some reporters couldn't let go. I had one of the reporters, he's still a current reporter with Channel 10, and he made the statement that he believed her. And he said, well, that they say he took a polygraph test. Well, you know, my attorney provided him with the polygraph test, and I always carry it with me. I have it here. And he had it in front of him, but yet he believed her. And he was one of the reporters that came out and stated that the state attorney's office and the police department did investigate it thoroughly enough, you know. And not only they were investigating the charge, when they couldn't find nothing on those charges, they started investigating my travel and everything they had to try to find something on me. They found nothing. So that's what I had to deal with, you know, basically from that. And in fact, 2 months later, this still reporter was trying to blame me for everything in the department. Even when I was on administrative leave, this reporter stated on TV that he was interviewing somebody, a recruit had just been killed, died in the fire college. And he had someone that he was interviewing saying they felt it was my fault that that recruit was killed because of I didn't provide proper radios. Well, of course that wasn't true. And the reporter father, the person he was interviewing, his daughter worked as a reporter for Channel 10. So those are the things I had to deal with, you know. And I couldn't understand why, you know, they didn't, you know, just read the reports. You know, my employees, I had the majority of my employees. Every last one of my employees except one said that he believed what I was saying. I mean, they wrote, said, no, it didn't occur. She didn't say this didn't happen. The only person that she socialized with said he believed her. Not that he saw me do anything or heard me say something, but he believed her. So those are the type of things I was dealing with. And like I said, when I took the job, I even told my staff that I knew I wouldn't be around for a long time. I knew the type of position. They weren't going to allow me because I wasn't a caretaker. You know, I was a person that was going to run that department and do it the best of my ability. And it's hard for a county director, any director. Miami-Dade is a very political organization. You got so many people pulling you from different ways, wanting you to do a favor for a friend here, or, you know, follow this. And like I said, the code word is team player. You know, they'll send you somebody and say, could you hire this person? Is a good friend to me. Don't do background checks. You know, to try to give you do certain things. And it is a lot of pressure. It's hard to be a director in a highly political environment. And Miami-Dade is probably at its worst. You know, that's why these lobbyists make so much money. That's their job.
I have two questions. How did you deal with the everyday, in fact, the everyday racism, you know, the pressures of everyday life in your job, sir? And my second question is, back then, what was it, the late 70s, early 80s?
Early 70s.
How was racism different back then than it is now, or is it the same?
Well, the first question, it took a lot, you know, I think some people say I was just too naive or stupid to know what was occurring around me, you know, because my wife was very fearful of, you know, somebody actually doing harm to me. And I wasn't sure. You know, I didn't know whether it was just idle threats or where, you know, I couldn't imagine that they would actually do bodily harm. Yes, they vandalized my car, but I could never imagine that they would actually lead me into a fire or let me die. I never felt that way, you know. Now, I don't know if I was being naive and stuff, but, you know, I know we had people that were card-carrying members of the Klan. When we first joined the fire department down south, we couldn't even sleep in some of the dormitories. We had to sleep in the bays. You know, that's where they keep the trucks. And we couldn't eat at the dining table. So it was a lot of harassment and things that we had to deal with through an organization. And I knew it was going to be a challenging, but I found it to be a worthwhile career. My mother always told me that the challenge is always on me to change people, you know, and always use it as a challenge on my ability to change people's mind. And that's the approach that I took. And, you know, in my life, you know, if you didn't like me, my challenge was to make you understand, if you not even like me, but understand where I was coming from. And the second question, yeah. You know, it's just like normal day living. People change over time. I think some of the racism and hostility, because they felt we were coming into their home, you know, they had very limited encounter with African Americans. So it was a lot of hostility that we were coming in and taking their jobs, coming into their home. I think once they got to know that, you know, I mean, one of the questions, when we went to the fire station, they wanted to know, did we eat something different? You know, no, I like steak too, you know, so, you know, so I think the more we work together and get to know one another, it gets better. And I'm sure over the years have gotten a lot, you know, like the union, I mean, and the hostility and the hatred that we used to, the union tried to stop once we even graduated, the day of our graduation, the union president tried to get an injunction to stop our class from entering the fire station. It failed. When he couldn't do that, he signed us up as members. So, but I think those things, as we get along and work with one another, it changes because they get to know, hey, our family, we want the same thing. We want better neighborhoods. We want better, you know, homes. We want better schools for our children and things like that. So those things change. So it is a lot different. Do you still have stuff? Yeah, you're going to have a small, but I just don't see it. And in fact, when I was forced out, you know, I got a lot of, you know, calls from firefighters. And actually, most of them were white firefighters, too. That was calling, wanted me to fight it. They didn't want me to leave because I was fair to them. You know, I spent 6 days a week working, you know. I mean, I would go in at my office 7:30 and not leave till after 7 o'clock, you know. And I guess that's why I was having the chest pains, too. So it was a question.
You could go back and do things differently to you know, avoid the stress and the disrespect and different things that your family went through. What would you do differently?
I don't know if I could. I don't think I would do anything different. You know, sure, you don't want to make the little small mistakes you made or, you know, be a little smarter and try a little bit better. But overall, as far as the way I conducted myself and the way, you know, I live my life, you know, I think if I changed that, I wouldn't be the person my mother had prayed and hoped that I would be.
What were some of the things, or an example or two of what they were actually accusing you of that weren't true? What level of attack was that?
Yeah. I was accused of sexual harassment from my executive assistant. Now, my and the ironic part, she accused me May 10th. Now, this is an employee that had been working almost less than a year, and been out, I think, about 40% of the time ill. And so she was sick, out of time, and I used to talk to her husband, and I requested maybe, because she was in no pay status, and because I wouldn't give her administrative pay for the days she was off, you know, she was upset. But I told her it is best to take administrative leave off. Take leave of absence. And, you know, and I told her job would be waiting for her. A lot of my staff members wanted me to replace her because that was a critical position on some of the things that were going. After 9/11, everything was crazy. We were working very hard trying to make changes to the operation to make sure Miami-Dade was safe. So, and I carry this, and I'm studious for notes. Now, May 10th, she accused me of the sexual harassment. Now, she nominated for me on May 1st for Miami-Dade County Leadership Award. And this stuff, Chief Phillips, with integrity, a man of his word, you know, always pressing to his, the firefighters, you know, to respect one another. And those are some of the things that I went out personally to the fire station stressing to these people that, you know, our role is to protect the citizens of Miami-Dade County. We exist, not for ourselves, but we exist for the citizens of this community. And so those are the things that, and I made that commitment to them, that I was ensure that their safety, make sure I provided all the tools necessary for them to be successful in their job. So, this ironic that she wrote this May 1st, and then she go out on sick again a week later, and then 2 days later, that's when she accused me of that accusation, which was cleared. And then the second part was that she did, I started a PhD program, and she said she did my homework for one of my classes when I went on business. And, you know, it was ironic. This happened in late February when I went to Hong Kong representing Miami-Dade because of our skills in rescue and recovery, and I was a speaker at that conference. But she said that I forced her to write one of my homework assignments. Now, she did type it. I was out of town, didn't know. She went in my office, and prior to me going there, it was an 8-week course, and we had 6 homework assignments. And one of this assignment that she said she typed for me was journal articles. They were 1 or 2 pages, and all we had to do was response to. We had to say whether we liked the article and did it relate to the program. So the Miami Herald put in there research paper, 49-page research paper. 15 of those pages had just my name on it. It was 15 articles. 15 had my name on it. Then the other, each article was no more than 2 paragraphs, whether I agree or disagree, and I think it was about 10 blank pages. And they knew it. They had the paper, but the Miami Herald printed in there, she did research articles. And then when they did do an investigation, they did a forensic of her computer. You know where she got that idea? From Naples, where the Naples fire chief, this was on her computer, where the North Naples fire chief is accused of ordering an employee to do his college homework. And she was working on a labor management, and it was on her computer. You know, in the media, they knew it, but they didn't print it. You know.
Was this the same Herald reporter who was giving you a hard time other times?
Yeah, he was one of them. It was about 3 of them. It was about 3 of them, but this one was the most vicious, you know. You know, I couldn't understand it. You know, when I did my dissertation, and when I did my dissertation for my PhD program, I did it on office politics because I wanted to know how they did it. Well, it was simple. You know, I kept looking just in front of me, and they came on the side. And then I found out, basically, and it's basic experience, I had no one to mentor me to prepare me to go in the fire chief position. And it's totally different. My previous chief really didn't want me there, so he really didn't mentor me as far as what lay ahead, roadblocks to look out for, and everything else, you know. But I find out it's all about relations. You know, who you develop relationship with different reporters, you feed them information, and that's how some of the reports are slanted. You know, it's ironic that years ago, you know, I used to enjoy Walter Cronkite, and I know most people probably don't remember that, but that's when reporters used to report the story. Now, these reporters are so in tune to become the story, a part of the story, and want to be the first one to report a story. And they don't care whether they get it right. They want to say which one has most sensationalism, you know, which can get people to come, you know, first at 10, you know, exclusive. No one they have no exclusive, but they do the thing. I even had one reporter come in my neighborhood and question my neighbors, want to know how did I can't afford to live in that neighborhood. So those are the type of things that I had to deal with. You know, so it was stressful. And like I said, prior to me even becoming fire chief, you know, I was getting threats in my office when I was up for the position. My secretary was a nervous wreck because she was getting the calls where they were threatening to kill me. We had where they brought in 2 firefighters and a chemist, where where someone overheard them at a restaurant, you know, talking about what they was going to do against me, you know, and they had my address, my social security number, and everything else. And she reported to the Miami Police Department, and they brought them in for questioning, and they all plead the fifth. And I got that here, Miami-Dade Police. I keep all that stuff. They got it, Miami-Dade Police, and you know, you got pictures and everything of their face and what occurred. So those are the things I had to deal with, and it's hard. You know, my concern during that period of time was, of course, my family, because when they said it was going to muddy the waters, they weren't sure. The Miami-Dade Police, it was the City of Miami Police Department, wasn't sure whether they was talking about coming to my home, doing something, and causing damage to my home that could cause harm to, you know, my family members. So,
Police never really investigated it.
no, they did. No, they did. What happened was Miami-Dade Police Department took over from the City of Miami, and what happened was Miami-Dade. It was Assistant Chief stated that City of Miami had messed it up where they couldn't bring prosecution because apparently they did something, and since they plead the fifth, and Miami-Dade felt they should have pressured them more. I even had to wear a wire because I had commissioners that trying to strong arm me on different things. I mean, those are the type of things that I had to go through, you know, and where they had to monitor. Miami Police Department had to monitor my home to make sure that nothing was carried out. So those are the threats and things that I had to deal with. And, you know, and it was very stressful. It was a very stressful time.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Let me just get this. Okay. Quick reminder for our internet audience at home, if you'd like to purchase a copy of Fighting More Than Fires, call the number on your screen. We'll have Mr. Phillips sign it for you, and we'll ship it to you wherever you are in the U.S. for free. All of our live streamed events are archived, so if you don't catch them live, you can go to the Books and Books website, go on the link to the live streaming, and any event that we've had live on the internet will be archived for you to watch at your convenience. For those of you here in the house, we have the book for sale at the counter over there. Mr. Phillips is going to be signing here at the table to the left of the podium, and please thank him for sharing his stories with us. Thank